Hi guys, welcome back. This is exercise 3.1, box model and layout. Now in this particular exercise, we're going to be building off all of the techniques we learned from the previous set of lecture slides and one-off examples where we explored things like the box model, box aesthetics, and also float positioning to create page layouts. You can see that I've already downloaded the source code here, and I brought it up into Sublime Text. And the main two files that we'll be working with here is the index.html page and also the style.css page, of course. Okay. I've also gone ahead and brought this up in a browser here so we can see kind of where we're at, and let's talk a moment about what we're going to do in this exercise. Okay, so you can see here these are all of the page content that we added in all the previous exercises. So here we have all of the text, videos, images, and links from previous and past exercises. And using spacing like padding and margin and width and height that we learned from the box model example, we're going to start sizing and adding spacing to these elements. We're also going to add some fun box aesthetics like background images, gradients, and border radius to round the corners of our boxes, and some box shadow to add some drop shadows onto some of these elements. So we'll add some box containers here to our page layout and style them, give them some aesthetic styling. And then next, we're going to move on to integrate float positioning to create some column structures into the layout. So to start off with, let's go ahead and bring up the code, and we're going to go into the index.html page. And I've decided that I want the header here to have two main panels in it. And you'll remember from the previous exercise that we created a logo panel and a navbar panel. And that will allow us to create a container that stretches across the entire screen. But I'd also like to create some wrapper divs that we can use to center content using auto margin, which we saw in the previous lecture slide examples. So we'll want to take like this logo here and push it into a container that's centered, even though we'll have a larger surrounding box called logo panel that will stretch with a gradient texture 100% of the screen. Okay, so anytime you want to create a box inside of a box for aesthetic purposes, a div is most likely your go-to element. Remember that in HTML5 we do have semantic elements like header and section, and these are mostly reserved for semantically suggesting that this is a certain section of the page, or that the content in here has a certain relationship or meaning. In this case, we're just interested in creating some boxes for the sake of aesthetically styling some things. So here we have a box with the ID of navbar and a box with the ID of logo, and inside of these I'm going to create an inner box called a div with a class of wrapper. This, and we'll go ahead and close this off here, and we can even make a little comment here to let ourselves know later on that this particular closing div closes the wrapper like that. And we'll go ahead and add another one here. So sometimes you'll see people creating a single wrapper that will enclose all of your elements, and oftentimes then you give it an ID. Usually people name it an ID of wrapper or an ID of container. Now in our case, we're going to have some bars across the whole screen that'll stretch 100% across the whole top of the browser. And inside of that, we have the need to have several smaller wrappers that are going to center content inside of a larger box that's stretching across the whole screen. So for that reason, we're going to have several wrappers, and each of our wrappers is then going to have a class name of wrapper, because remember, class you can use multiple times, whereas an ID you should really only use it once per page. So we're going to have a couple class of wrappers here. We're also going to create a box that is aesthetically going to carry a wood texture inside of it. So all of our sections, like this About section and the Artist Corner section and the Company News section, all of these page sections that are in the main content area, all of these sections will be centered using a wrapper, and there will also be another outer box with an ID of wood that we can create that will hold a wood texture inside of it that's going to go behind all these sections. So we'll just go ahead and give this guy a div ID of wood, like that, and then inside of it we'll have a div with the class of wrapper so that we can center content inside of a smaller box here. Okay, and I want this to end. Both of these guys have to close below all the sections before we get down to the details section and the footer. So I can come down here past the ending of the news section here, and we'll go ahead and add a closing div for the wrapper. Dot wrapper, and also a closing section for the wood texture. So the wood texture here is going to take up 100% width of the screen, whereas the wrapper will have a fixed width and will be centered to center all the sections of the page. Okay. Let's see, we also have the details section, which is just before the footer, and this will have 3 columns eventually. One column will be the contact information, and then another column will be links to our sister sites and other related shoe business companies. And then the third column here is going to be for the social media links. And all of these 3 columns here, I want to have them also inside of a fixed width that is centered using a div with a class of wrapper. Okay. So details will stretch 100% of the screen, but then I'll have a box with a fixed width inside of it. So your site might not be made up exactly the same as mine. Aesthetically, this is just I'm accomplishing the look that I'm going for, but it's perfectly fine if your wrapper structure or your div structures aren't the same as mine. Okay. So that looks like everything's in place here in the index page. Now I've gone ahead on all the other pages like catalog, contact, pricing, and sale, and I've added all of these wrappers and divs with the wood texture. I've added all of these in there for you. So I just wanted to add it to the index page just to show you where they were placed in the code. Okay,